So, somehow, there seems to be two masters of fire, Kai and Wyldfyre. Now, I know a lot of people think Wyldfyre is actually the master of heat, but this has not been said in the show. The only reason the Ninjago wiki says Wyldfyre is the master of heat is because this French article says she is the master of heat. This one article is the only source for this. Keep in mind that it is originally in French, and it also says Wyldfyre was in a plane crash, which is incorrect. In the show, it wasn't a plane crash, but some sort of spaceship. So, this article calling her the master of heat could also be incorrect, potentially a language barrier thing. In fact, recently, someone directly asked Doc Wyatt, the lead writer on Dragon's Rising, if her power was heat, and he said that the ninja don't yet know what her power is, and that it's a mystery. And then, according to the Brick Fan on Twitter, at the San Diego Comic-Con, it was said that Wyldfyre's element is still a mystery. So, I am going to go ahead and say that I think Wyldfyre is actually a master of fire, not heat. After all, not only does this tweet by Doc Wyatt indicate that there is a very real possibility that there are somehow two masters of fire, but the ninja themselves seem to think she has fire.
There can't be two elemental masters of fire at the same time. It's impossible. Also, it's rude. I can't make sense of it either.
So, how can there be two masters of fire? Well, it is actually already known that there can be multiple users of the same element. First off, it seems there are two masters of water, Nia and Niad. Nia became one with the ocean, like Niad. But since she stayed a master of water after returning to human form, it seems Niad would also still be a master of water. She clearly still is one with the element of water. Then, Lloyd's power of energy actually consists of fire, ice, lightning, and earth. Now, Lloyd can't actually control any individual elemental power with energy, but he used to have golden power, which is likely a more powerful form of energy, and also consists of fire, ice, lightning, and earth. But a big thing is that the user of golden power can control all the elements that make it up, unlike with energy. For example, Lloyd controlled Earth in Season 3, Episode 3. Then there is the element of amber, which can absorb and replicate other elements. And this element was created by a blacksmith using chronosteel. If someone can replicate other elements like fire temporarily, why can't there be two permanent elemental masters? And hypothetically, someone could do the exact same thing the first elemental master of amber did, and become another elemental master of amber. Additionally, there are two masters of time because they are twins and the element of time is apparently easily divisible. However, fire is not easily divisible, and I doubt that Wyldfyre is somehow Kai's long-lost twin sister. On the topic of time, there can be two masters of any element at the same time if time travel is involved. For example, perhaps Wyldfyre is the master of fire from the future who was sent back in time. After all, we have no idea where her ship came from, and she had this futuristic-looking pod. Although Ninjago is pretty futuristic in general, so that may not mean too much. However, I don't think any of these examples could apply to Wyldfyre, not even the time travel idea, because the show heavily implies she got her powers because of the merge. Now, the reason there exists this rule that there can only be one master of each element is because of how the elements are passed down. An elemental master loses the element once they pass the element down to their kid. Even with the time twins, the element of time was split between them, so they only really each had half an element. But what if there were two lineages of the same element? Or two versions of the same element? And then the thing is, there are numerous fire, ice, lightning, earth, and wind dragons. In fact, Stormbringer, a lightning dragon, has a kid, a baby lightning dragon. Yet, Stormbringer is still a lightning dragon. And then, Tommy Andreasen, the creator of Ninjago, said that the phoenix from Chima were masters of fire. It seems to me that humans are the only species that have a restriction where they lose their elemental power once they have children. This might be because it is natural for dragons and phoenixes to have their elements, but it is not natural for humans to have elemental powers. However, there have been 2 known non-human elemental masters in Ninjago. The most obvious one being Zane, and obviously it is not natural for him to have an elemental power. However, the other one is Niad. Now remember how there seem to be 2 masters of water, Niad and Nia? Well, Niad is Merlopian, and Merlopians are sea people, so it is possible it is quite natural for her to have the power of water. So, it is possible Niad was able to gift the human the element of water without losing it herself. Anyway, my point is, the existence of the dragons and the phoenixes mean there are in fact multiple lineages of the same elements. It is just that humans cannot retain their elements once they pass them down. And so far it seems only one of each element was gifted to humans. But I think it is quite possible for there to be 2 humans who have the same elemental power. They just need to come from different lineages. And maybe there can be different versions of the same elemental power. For example, perhaps water and ice are 2 versions of the same element. I mean, they basically are the same element. In fact, Nia managed to gain control over ice in Season 11. So perhaps Wyldfyre's element is just another version of fire. But wait, how exactly did the first elemental masters get their powers anyway? Master Wu said his father gave them to people, but this may not be true. I mean, the first Spinjitzu master is half dragon and half Oni, so he should logically only have fire, ice, lightning, and earth, and also maybe wind, because those are the powers of dragons, the powers of the firstborn. There don't exist any dragons of the other elements, because they don't have them. Now, obviously, dragons are connected to the 4 main elements, which the firstborn has. However, dragons are also connected to all elemental powers. This is evident because all the elemental masters can create elemental dragons, and certain dragons, like Ryu, can power up elemental masters. We also know that it is not only source dragons that can power up elemental masters, as the matriarch dragon was able to power up Lloyd, and one of the lead writers confirmed that she is not a source dragon. So it seems all dragons are connected to elemental energy, and that very powerful dragons, like source dragons and matriarch dragons, can power up elemental masters. So, what if some very powerful dragons can create new elemental powers? This would explain why some elements seem a bit random, like technology, speed, and poison, because powerful dragons could have randomly created these elements, instead of there being a set list of elements that have always existed. And it would explain how the elemental power of technology can exist, because it is not a power that could possibly exist hundreds of years ago before tech and computers, so it must have been created by a dragon recently. However, there is also the element of amber, which was allegedly created by the first master of amber. It is possible that the story of amber being created from tree sap is untrue, and the first master of amber was given this power by a dragon. Or, amber might not technically be an elemental power. After all, we never saw Skylar create an elemental dragon like the others. Now, according to Lloyd, Master Wu's scrolls indicated that the merge had something to do with source dragons.
That it was somehow tied to something called source dragons.
If powerful dragons, like source dragons, created elemental powers before, perhaps they created new elemental powers when the merge happened, especially as, so far, there are 3 known new elemental masters since the merge: Sora, Euphrasia, and Wyldfyre. We know that both Euphrasia and Wyldfyre got their powers when the merge happened, while when exactly Sora got her powers is unconfirmed. but I'm going to go ahead and guess that she probably got her powers when the merge happened. And we know that elemental powers are connected to the merge as they can fix merge quakes. Now, I actually think the reason these new users got their specific powers is because of their location. Wyldfyre got wind powers, and she was in the Cloud Kingdom, up in the sky. Sora got technology powers, and she was in Imperium, a place entirely made of technology. Wyldfyre got fire powers, and she was in some sort of fiery lava place. So, I think all these powers are new elemental powers, because the thing is, Sora's power is technology, and there is no way that could have existed hundreds of years ago. Like, was there somehow an early master of technology who was creating horse carriages? It is impossible for technology to have always existed, and so it must be a new element. And if technology is a new element, then Wyldfyre and Wyldfyre's powers must also be new elements. Essentially, I think Wyldfyre's power is a new version of the element of wind, and I think Wyldfyre's power is a new element of fire. These new wind and fire elements have separate lineages to the pre-existing wind and fire. This would mean Morrow's element of wind did not pass to Wyldfyre, and that would actually make a lot of sense. Morrow died decades ago, but somehow retained the power of wind as a spirit, possibly because he was sent to the Cursed Realm. We can assume that after his spirit dissipated, his power was finally released and able to be passed on, which the creator of Ninjago confirmed. However, that should have happened years ago in universe, not when the merge happened. So, it would make a lot of sense if Morrow's element of wind found a new master years ago, and Wyldfyre's power of wind was created when the merge happened. Now, the only thing is that one of the lead writers on Dragon's Rising said this, which is pretty much saying that Wyldfyre's power is the same as Morrow's. There is a possibility that he is lying or being misleading on purpose, but of course, there is also the possibility that Wyldfyre and Sora's powers are new elements, but Wyldfyre's isn't. But that begs the question as to why Wyldfyre would only get wind once the merge happened. Why not before? Wyldfyre could have easily been revealed to be the new master of wind in Dragon's Rising, but she could have said she has had the power of wind for a long time. But she specifically said she only got her powers after the merge.
But after the merge, I discovered I was an elemental master.
Now, there is a possibility that if an elemental master dies without passing their element on, their element is stored somewhere, perhaps in another dimension. And so wind went to that dimension, and maybe some powerful dragons created a new fire element and the element of technology, and gave those powers to new users. But they died, and so their powers went to this dimension. Or maybe someone was collecting elemental powers in a certain dimension, and after Morrow died, they collected wind, and then they forced some dragons to make new elements of fire and technology. Either way, it could be that wind, technology, and the new fire were all being stored in one dimension, or place. But the merge caused the powers to break free, and they all went to whatever places fit them best. Or maybe this wind really is a new elemental power, and the people who work on the show are giving purposefully misleading answers. Anyway, feel free to like and subscribe and check out some of my other videos.